Okay, Mary Ann, you want to call the roll, please?
Mr. Richmond?
Here.
Ms. Ruska? Here. Dr. King?
Here.
Mr. Moon?
Here.
Mr. Welch?
Here.
Mr. Welch?
Here.
Mr. Cindy?
Here. Okay, we're going to go into discussion and information items. FOIA request.
We received one FOIA request after the board packet was sent out. I think Mary Ann already responded. It was a FOIA request to review the pictures that Joel from Aramark presented to the Board of Education regarding the water building up outside the exterior walls of the field house.
Okay. All right. Next item is the monthly budget report.
Tim's going to be presenting the monthly budget report. We spent some time together today with Mr. McGinnis and Eileen Pusateri, his accounts payable and receivable administrative assistant. And as I discussed at a previous board meeting, I think we need to be looking to move this monthly budget report to the committee of the whole meeting. An issue that arises is like this past week, last week Wednesday, the treasurer's report closed out the month of March. So Tim basically has less than 24 hours to try to compile some data. And based on the board's questions over the last few months, it's tough to get that deep into what the board is looking for and some of the questions that have been asked in less than 24 hours before the board packets have to be compiled and go out Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. So we spent some time on it today. Tim's passing around a draft of an in-depth budget report on accounts of some of the questions that have been coming up, and I'll let him touch on that. But Tim is not in town at the April committee of the whole, so that's why we're looking for, if the next session after July 1st, we'll start doing these at the committee of the whole. We'll move the monthly budget report to the financial section of the committee of the whole. But I'll let Tim go into his current report that he has compiled for this meeting.
Okay, month of March 1st, property taxes were due, the first installment for the year for everyone. This is the biggest month we have for the year. We took in $8.9 million in real estate taxes. Our total revenue was $9.3 million. We're now at 93% of budget for all of our accounts in terms of revenue. And I've highlighted some of the items on there that are of note. Building rentals went over $50,000 in the month, so we're actually double what our budget was for that account. And I highlighted some of the percentages for the property taxes, the current year collections, the prior year. Also included in the income for this month is the annual interest payment we received from the Township Treasurer. We received interest on our balance in the total pooled accounts once a year in March. The average yield over the past year has been 0.7%, so obviously not very good. The primary reason being that all of the investments they make have to obviously be very conservative investments. But we did receive $43,000. I also included in your packet the letter from them that also highlighted some of the revenue that we've received since 2003 on property tax revenue, and you can see in there, in some of the years past, we were earning hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to the $43,000 we earned this year. The expenditures for the month, $1.8 million, which is very similar to what it is every month. We're now at 71% on the budget for all of our expenditures. That's a little bit higher than the 67%, but if you take debt service into account, the debt service fund, we've already paid not only a principal payment in December, but also the interest payments, and we won't make those principal payments again in June. The operating fund balances increased to $10.8 million. Our total fund balance increased to $14.5 million. So we're at a very high level. Obviously, this is the highest level of the year. During the month of April, we're going to repay the loans back to the funds that we had borrowed. We had loaned money from the working cash fund into education, operations, and IMRF. You passed a resolution to do that towards the end of last year, and included in the resolution was that we would pay the money back when the tax revenue came in the spring. So we're going to pay that money back in April. The report that I passed around is just a draft of something that I had Eileen put together today, and just going through and picking out some of the items that are over budget. The reports behind that are the departmental budgets. These are the budget reports that she runs every month, sends out to all the department chairs. She gives me a copy of all the departmental budgets. But this, it shows, you know, the items that are over budget, the individual line items that are over budget. And, you know, if we're given the time, you know, we can go through and we can analyze a lot of these accounts and come up with a report like this that'll be a lot more detailed than this, and cover a lot more items. This was just a sample of something to see if this is something the board would like to see on a monthly basis. But as Kevin mentioned, trying to put something together like this, especially if it's an extensive report, would be very difficult to do for the first board meeting in the month. If we continue to have the bills paid at the first board meeting, which is an action item that the board has to approve, the financial report could be done at the committee of the whole meeting. Obviously, the financial report is not an action type of item, and that would give us a lot more time every month to really do a more thorough analysis of the financials at the end of each month.
Any questions for Tim?
Yeah, I have two questions. So, are you asking for the board to offer a consensus of whether we should move the budget discussion to the second meeting of the month versus we're doing it at the first meeting?
If the board wants a more detailed analysis of the financials every month, yes, it would have
But
to
even
go
if
to
we
the second.
don't, you don't have time to look at it usually before our meeting anyway, right?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
You don't often have a very short timeline to even look at it before you send it out to us, right?
For the board meeting,
Yeah.
not for the committee of the whole.
Well, it seems, we don't vote on it, it makes sense to me to move it so you
Yeah.
can take more time to look at it and provide us a little more information.
Does anybody have any issues with doing that?
But do we need that before we approve the bills? It just seems odd to me that we would approve the bills and then in 2 weeks, look at what we spent 2 weeks ago.
But if you look at our agenda item right now, the budget report is focusing just on the budget. Bills are coming after the budget report.
Right, the
So,
bills,
am I right, the budget would not reflect bills paid until we approve it, right?
correct.
Is it possible that we can have the budget at the same time frame, but have the detailed discussions on certain issues on the second?
Yes,
How's that?
Why don't we do that, Rob?
I can,
That way we still get the budget, people want to still see the budget early, or how we're doing against budget early
I can
on.
provide the same report
Yeah,
at the
just,
board meeting with all the detailed report off of the.
right, but the detailed
DCR system.
discussion on questions would be the.
Discussion would come later.
Right.
Yes.
And also in-depth analysis on revenue and also on overages and everything, okay?
See, actually, that would probably be better because questions are often generated during this meeting, which can then be addressed at the committee of the whole.
So does anybody have any issue with us doing that then? So what we're saying right now is at the board meeting, we will still present the budget, monthly budget report, but at the COW meeting, we will then have a more extensive discussion and answers of any questions generated from the budget, monthly budget report. Also, you'll be giving a report showing overages and expenditures.
Yes.
Okay.
Tim, are you going to be able to provide the report that you're doing right now, the general one? You have enough time to put that together for this meeting?
I can, yeah, I mean, well, what I'm doing now for this meeting, I can obviously do for any meeting. I could do a write-up. I can obviously do these
What you
these
can do is
two,
still the summary.
you know, we've got the two financial reports in here. I mean, those can obviously be done for the board meeting.
Right. So then all you have to put together for the cow would be the overages?
And
Well,
answers to any
and the
questions.
analysis of, I mean, I could do just the overages, but I think some people want more analysis of the revenue and the expenditures.
Right, but the issue I want to make sure we're covering is, in order for you to put that together, if it comes in on Wednesday, you barely have less than a half a day's of work to get that through. So, I mean, are we getting a quick report where that report could be more detailed and better if it waits all to come at the committee of the whole? If it's the closing of March and it has no impact on the bills that we're paying at this meeting, I don't know. I mean, I understand we can have it here in front of you, but if you're gonna have the same, it doesn't impact the voting on whether or not the bills that we approve would be driving an account over budget.
Well, let me ask it a different way. I thought what I was between what Gary and I said is that you would just provide us the statement of revenues and expenditures that you get, that's attached.
I can do that.
Because you don't have to do anything to
No,
that, right?
I can
So
do
you're
a
not gonna
report.
draft the memo part?
And just do all the
No.
rest of it at the second meeting.
Correct, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
That's better.
That's what
That
I'm
clarifies.
suggesting, if somebody's suggesting something different.
And then from the board meeting on this monthly budget, if there's questions that come up, those would be addressed at the cow meeting.
Right.
Yes.
Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah.
So the second question I had goes to that, which I've asked several months in a row. Now we're 3/4 of the way through the year. We're gonna be looking, Kevin's gonna start talking about next year's budget. From what we have here, it's still not possible to tell whether you think we're gonna be over budget or under budget for the current year. So I think somehow we need some kind of tool that helps us know, certainly on a quarterly basis at least, whether it, based on what we know now, do we project over budget or under budget? Because it affects the decisions we have to make if we're gonna keep a 20% and what we project the reserve to be at the end of the year.
Okay. So if we did that on a quarterly basis at the committee of the whole, that would be.
I could live with it on a quarterly basis if other people could, yeah.
So Tim, on a quarterly basis, you'll provide revenue
A projection.
projections?
Projections.
Okay.
yes.
Revenue, expenditure, and
expenditure.
reserve, right? Because that's what our goal is, a reserve goal. And the last question I have, and you touched on it, but I still don't understand it. On the expenditures on the bond, it looks like we still have to expend $1.2 million based on the budget. But on the revenues on the bond fund, it looks like we've collected all, I have to get the right one, hold on. Which, by the way, is page 39 on the expenditures. So we have unexpended of 1.2 million. But on the revenues, which is page 8, we have unrealized collection of 750,000. So, and again, we can wait till the next meeting, but I'll ask the question now. It appears we're gonna be $400,000 under collection of revenues versus expenditures based on what we have on these reports today.
Okay.
So that's the kind of thing we need to know if we're, and how that could happen, because doesn't the tax assessment, isn't it supposed to dollar for dollar cover
Yeah,
our?
we don't even send anything to the county on the tax assessment
Okay.
for the bonded interest. They calculate that on their own.
Well, could you just make that as part of your report then, please?
Okay, any other questions for Tim? Thank you, Tim. Okay, next one, we have the 2013 budget update.
Tonight we'll be presenting a few reductions in force in regards to non-certified staff. We'll probably have some additional non-certified staff matters that will need to be addressed at the April 24th meeting. But we're pretty much to a point to where all the reductions that I've been laying out for the Board of Education over the last 6 months have been acted upon. And, you know, based on our projections and the numbers we presented to you and the worksheets we're using, you know, that's between about 1.2 million and 1.3 million in reductions. So that will still show that we'll carry in some deficit next year. That could be anywhere from 200,000 to 400,000 in a deficit, depending on, you know, where this year finishes and fund balance and some of that. But we've pretty much made the reductions everywhere we can make the reductions. And as I told the board a few months ago and have been sharing with the board, after these reductions, there's not much more to go after in years to come. So I think it's important that we start together as a board and with my assistants, we start developing a plan of where we're going in the future to how we're going to address some of the revenue issues. As I said, as of next year, we'll have a slight deficit, but then right away, 2 years out, that deficit starts to climb again. Within 2 or 3 years, the PMA projection said we'll be back to about $1 million deficit again if we don't start adjusting some of that stuff. And that's even with, you know, obviously a lot of this will be contingent on collective bargaining, a new contract, but we still have to start putting together a plan to how we're going to address revenues for the district.
Any questions for Kevin?
I have a question. I have two questions, actually. The first one is if we use the figures that you just addressed, we're targeting at 23.5 roughly percent reserve this year. If we come in at budget, so we'd be at the same reserve, and then next year we come 400,000 deficit, which every 200,000 is a point on the reserve roughly, right, Tim? So now we're at 21, and again, that's projection. It could, if we don't get all of our revenues, we miss 200,000 in revenues, we might be under a 20% reserve.
Correct.
So, and as you said, we're already addressed all the cuts we're going to can possibly have, and I struggle without making some systematic or fundamentally even worse reductions, like cutting all of our sports and all of our clubs, and not next school year, but the one after, because we can't cut another 10 teachers, and even if we did, it might not even hit that number. How are we need to, as part of our, when are we going to start looking at the effect past next year? Because we know what we can do. We already pretty much have the numbers of what's going to do next year, but the year after, as you point out, there's been some communications to the public that we made a decision that we're not going to raise revenues until after we negotiate a new contract, but as we all know, I don't think that was something the whole board agreed to, and or majority of the board. So how are we going to look at more of a long-term scenario here? What's your plan for getting that in front of us so we can discuss it?
Well, one thing we would definitely have to look at is if it's not, based on however the board decides to go, we only have two options to increase revenue into the district, and that's through a referendum or through refinancing the working cash bonds, which are due in December. So, since there hasn't been any discussion on the first choice, which is the tax increase to the public, I think we really need to take a hard look at the working cash bonds that are coming due in December, and what the interest rate would be to refinance those, as well as what would be the impact on the community if we refinance those to establish some reserve. We need to establish a reserve to make sure we can pay our bills as we figure out, and the board figures out what they want to do going forward. But some of that direction needs to come from the board.
So how do you recommend we put something on the agenda or have meetings so we can start talking about that, providing some direction or guidance on how to think about it or move forward?
It's our meeting. We have to start requesting this be put on the agenda
Okay.
about the funds. When it says considerations for next month in the cow, I think that needs to be on the agenda. If every month we have to ask, is there an opportunity to talk with the union? And if that's not option, then we have to say, what are our other options? And we have to be looking at refinancing those working cash bonds, or are there other options? But it has to be put on the agenda. It's our agenda.
Okay.
And so that's why Kevin said in the summer you start looking at what you're going to do revenue enhancement, because we have some time available for that.
So we're going to start putting that as a regular item then on our committee of the whole meetings? Is that what, that sounds like Laura's suggesting? Is that what we're,
We can put it on there, but I think we need to strategically look at what the options are, because I think that our working cash bond does not expire until 2013.
I thought it was December 2012.
so did I?
2013.
Okay. Well,
So,
again,
but it's something that, like you're saying, for the following school year, what do we do in that situation? That's something to look at. And what other stuff's available out there, so.
Well, and I think for the next meeting, maybe for the cow, we should have a nice detailed summary about the working cash bonds. When do they expire and what would that mean? So we're clear on that option now and not waiting till the 11th hour. I don't understand why we have to wait till the 11th hour to talk about any of this stuff.
But the 11th hour is December 31st, 2013.
no, it's not. If we don't know what our funding's going to be at this time next year,
No, what I'm saying right now is, as Kevin was bringing up before, is that we need to start looking at this, and the summer would be a good time to look at revenue enhancements for the following school year, what we're gonna do, or the next school year, the board needs to decide. One of the options was the working cash bond, which is not going to expire until December 31st, 2013. You know, he thought it was gonna expire in 2012, it isn't, it's 2013.
Okay,
So-
well then if that, and again, we need to clarify that, as Laura said, the only other option to raise a significant amount of funds is to go for a referendum. If we don't have that in the plans to go for that this time next year, we miss the boat, then we have to do a budget for the following year, which we may or may not be able, we'd miss, if we're waiting until the working cash bonds to expire, we miss the first 5 months of the year, and already, whatever that fund is going to be, and it only leaves us one choice to make some pretty draconian measures, and I think we'd be gutting a lot of what the school has to offer if we have to make those cuts, because we don't have additional funding to include in that budget at the start of the second school year from now.
Say, Laura, you were here when we set up the first working cash bonds, right, 5 years ago. What was the scenario? Did you bring in somebody who presents the offering of these bonds? Is that something that we could do within the next 30 days?
We should bring in we should have the consultant talk to us.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
And we should know when they expire, and we should know what that option is. And if it's not a viable option, then we need to get another option on the table. We need to
Yeah.
know what all our options are, and not a month before we have to.
Exactly.
Gary, that you have experience with finance, what would your recommendation be?
I would suggest we start talking about it. I think we had some talks that in our closed session, start raising this issue and start bringing it forward and start talking about it. So if somebody wants to put it on the next board meeting, let's put it on the next board meeting as an agenda item.
Well, here, let me ask you a question. You have a finance council. Do our two finance council people think we should put this on the agenda and start talking about it?
I think we've talked about that we need to resolve this budget for coming up, spend our time doing that, and then move into this phase, whether it's the next meeting or the meeting after, and start looking at the two biggest things that are out there, the source of the revenue and the contract that has to be negotiated that is going to be the vast majority of our expenditures. Right now, we're about to deal with some items, like Kevin said. The reductions have been pretty much made. There's people here who are going to obviously have some interest in the final pieces of that budget tonight. And once we clear that budget hurdle, I think that is the next step. Where's our income coming from for the future? Not for just the 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, but a 5-year plan. And what does the board want to do collectively as far as the negotiations for the expenditure side? I mean, those are the two biggest items that should take center stage after we complete our budget work here, which I think tonight, Kevin, is most of that then done?
I think we should probably hold the revenue question and the summary on the working cash bonds till the May meeting. Because the next meeting, I'm gonna probably have to bring forward a few more reductions, minor stuff and reductions of personnel, as well as I wanna do some of the recall to get some staff back that we know we're gonna need for next year. And that would be some of the final pieces in place regarding preparation to build the budget.
And then there's some pieces over the summer when we figure
Right.
out what our student population is and how many transfer in, transfer outs we have, that we have to staff the classrooms for that.
Right, but the month of May, there shouldn't be much to bring back to the Board of Education in regards to the upcoming budget for next school year, with the exception of we're gonna talk with the foundation and the booster club and talk about some of those activity passes. But with that aside, there's really not much remaining on the budget side where that would provide some time for us to start talking about revenue enhancements and revenue strategies.
I think the other thing we'd have to look at also is the PMA projections, scrub those clean,
Yep,
scrub that second year clean.
and we could have him come back and
Right.
present to the board in May again, if that's what we want to start doing, and have him.
And look at certain assumptions in there. Pull out some of those things we know were overstated expenditures, clear those out, and
Right.
clean up the projections.
Okay.
And we still have time left on that contract,
Yes.
so
So are we agreeing, at least four of us, the next, not this cow, the one after, we're gonna, and probably going forward, have revenue issues, however we're gonna word it?
I would suggest we look at the PMA presentation.
Yeah.
Let's look at based on
Well,
what we're projecting next year's budget deficit to be. Look at those PMA presentations to see what that second year out is really gonna look like.
Again, so
Sounds like
we'll have a section in the meeting on it, and Laura also asked that we get more information on the status of working cash bonds. I think we should do that also.
I have that written down.
Okay.
That would be William Blair's, or currently our provider for those, correct, Tim?
Elizabeth Dennison?
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
I think Howie said he could find out about the,
Okay.
when they'll be paid off and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
and I would like to propose then in April that we establish some kind of calendar, like how we're going to progress through that. So in April, either you could bring it to the board, suggest it, and lay this out. In May, we're going to look at this work in June, and so that we can see that going forward when we have expectations and not just kind of wait for them to surface.
Like a Gantt chart.
Yeah, like a Gantt chart. I think, come April, our next cow in 2 weeks, we should kind of have a game plan on what are the things we want to see, and then we might want to populate that.
Okay.
Okay, any other question on 2013?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
I think, I don't want people to get the impression that all of a sudden our default position is raise taxes or whatever, because I don't think it is. I think the most important thing we're going to do is what our major expenditures are going to be with this contract. So I don't want to jump the gun on that. That's sort of going to determine everything from my perspective.
You can't, John, we aren't gonna know the results of our next union agreement until after we have to make the budget for the fiscal year
Right,
after
but I don't want to
this.
negotiate in public.
No.
So that's
This
sort of
is
my
serious,
point here.
serious due diligence that we need to do.
But I think we need to say
To be
in
prepared.
public that if we were to wait until we negotiate a new contract, the worst-case scenario, when would funds be available? And we're talking almost three school years from now, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right.
So where are we going to have money for 3 years?
I think that we need to wait to see how PMA scrubs it out to show what we need to look at.
But,
Because PMA is going to be able to give us the projections, they'll show us where the shortfalls are, and what our needs are going to be going forward. And also, with their experience, given where we're at right now, labor-wise, status-wise, on everything else, show us, this is where you need to be at, And I think that they've done a great job with their one presentation showing us what we were financially wise, and I think we need to look at it. But I think that, like Gary said, let PMA scrub it down, come up with their revised projections, and make sure we're right on where we want to be.
That's fine, that's part of the picture.
but we
Yeah.
need to address the pink elephant. There are 3 years that we have to fund. And we talk about this next contract, but we have to be realistic on what that time frame looks like. And we have to have enough money to cover 3 years.
And PMA will show us what we need to have covered.
Well, let's make
That's a
sure that
start.
question is there when they are presenting.
I think it's part of the presentation. All right, anything else on 2013 budget? All right, the next part of our,
Yeah, just to make clear, Tim is not at the next committee of the whole, so the first budget, the full-blown budget report won't start till May. So I don't want anybody sending me emails saying, hey,
where's Tim?
Tim is
Well-
on
Tim escaped.
vacation.
Can he do
Tim
it,
left.
So if you have questions for the budget report for this month, we should ask them now.
I suggest Skype.
Okay,
well, can you do a projection based on the quarter? You're not gonna be able to do it the next meeting? He's not gonna. be here,
24th, so he'll be here in May, he could provide one in May.
But he won't be here the second one.
In 2
Can he-
weeks, correct.
Can he present that at the next regular meeting then? Because
Yeah, May 10th, I think it
Could
is.
you do
that's
that,
okay,
Tim?
instead of at the committee in the whole.
Exactly, John.
So what we asked for with the quarterly projection
Oh,
and where we're
okay.
going to be, since you're not gonna be at the next meeting of the committee of the whole, Kevin, is it okay if he
Yep.
brings it to the next regular meeting?
okay, so then in May,
Second Tuesday in May
Yeah.
is May 8th.
all right, any other thing on 2013?